How many of you grew up thinking that sex is a dirty word? Or running away from any conversation around sex? Like most of you, I turned red every time sex appeared before me or instantly changed the subjects. And that's what most people did around me. So I thought that was how it's supposed to be. But all of that changed when I was 19. Because the 19-year-old me decided that I was going to talk about sex with the entire internet. But today is not about me. Today is about you. Today I'm here to share your stories because whether you realize it or not, these stories belong to all of us. We're starting our first story with the story of a young girl. She was going through something that most of us have gone through in our puberty. A 12-year-old girl in Thane's Ulhas Nagar had just gotten her first period. We all remember that time in our lives, don't we? There's bleeding, first time you get cramps, first time you talk about your cycles with your girlfriends. She went through something a little different. Her 30-year-old brother saw period stains on her body and decided that she had gotten in an affair and that she was not a virgin anymore. She was tortured for 4 days using tongs, and her body had inflicted burns. When she couldn't take the burns anymore, she succumbed to death. The girls in our country have to go through this on a regular basis. She wasn't just subjected to this because she has a uterus, but because someone decided that a 30-year-old male did not need the basics of menstruation. Our second story is about a 24-year-old woman in Bhilwara's Rajasthan. She was subjected to a forced virginity test, and her in-laws and the villagers decided that she wasn't khara mal or she did not have her own virtue. She was subjected to rape right before her marriage, and according to her, she did not conceal that fact. But that did not stop the in-laws and the villagers from taking away her humanity, her dignity, and human rights once again. The girls in our country are not just subjected to this because this is scientific and immoral, but because nobody taught them that virginity is a myth and has no biological basis. The next story is a little intimate. You've heard about it, just not in the news. A 19-year-old man DM'd us asking for help and asking if he was broken. We realized that he didn't want to have sex with his girlfriend, not because he didn't want to have sex, but just he thought it was too soon. But there was a cultural pressure around this. Aren't men supposed to always want sex? Aren't men supposed to be always ready for action? Because of that pressure, he succumbed to it and engaged in sexual activity, only to realize he wasn't ready for it. What happened next was that he felt broken. Not because he was broken, because everyone taught him that they're supposed to want sex, not because they're supposed to have it, just for the sake of pleasure. There are countless stories like this. And what we see in common is that they have fear, loss, anticipation. They are stories of shame. But what they also have in common is a lack of education. So how do we bridge that gap? I've been running an Instagram page for 3 years, and I can tell you that that is not enough. I wish that a government campaign for STI awareness could make lives simpler, happier, easier, safer, but they don't. For this to work, we have to make sure that each and every person is getting age-appropriate, evidence-based, and comprehensive sexuality education, one that is fit for them. In 2005, India implemented the Adolescents Education Program developed by the Department of Education and National AIDS Control Organization. This was designed to teach high school students about their sexuality, sexually transmitted infections, and contraception. But without fail and without much surprise, 12 states in India stopped the program citing morally objectionable content. The program then became diluted and ultimately it stopped. When people talk about sex education, they think we are sex-crazed deviants who are going to ruin their children's lives forever. But the truth is, whether you talk about it in safe settings in classrooms or not, these conversations are still happening. And they're happening right under your noses. If they don't happen in classrooms, they're happening in uninformed and unsafe settings where consequences could be life-altering and, as you saw, sometimes deadly. When I was growing up, I was told that knowledge is power. When I was in school, I was taught education is a right. Then why are we trying to take all of that away from young people in our country? Why we do what we do? So what do we do until we don't get comprehensive sexuality education? Do we just give up? Do we stop? Do we ignore everything? Our story started 3 years ago because of another story of a brutal gang rape case. We could not sit quiet and not talk about stuff that was happening in our environment with our peers anymore. And we started a page that gave voice to thousands of people across the country. These are their stories, and these are their wishes of how they want sexuality education in our country. But what can you do? The problem isn't that there is a lack of education or there is a lack of curriculum or resources. The problem is that we don't want to accept that people are having sex, that there is sexuality among teenagers, and there is a need for all of this. The government just needs to implement it, and we need to change our minds. All of these stories of loss, anticipation, grief, shame, I hope that I wake up one day and these stories have changed into stories of love, autonomy, and pleasure. But that is not going to happen until you take matters into your own hands. Pun intended.